So welcome to our session entitled FOLIO and Metadb, Strengthening the Relationship. Let's see if the clicker works. It does. So this is going to be a chance for us to have a discussion. And we have what I'm calling our discussion leaders, which includes myself as the co-chair of the Product Council. And I'm also at the University of Chicago here. This is actually my first time being in this building for any length of time. I really had only been in the lobby before. So it's a new experience for me too. And we also have Simeon Warner, who's the co-chair of the Community Council from Cornell University. And Sharon Beltane, co-chair of the Reporting SIG from Cornell. And we have Nassib Nassar, who's the director of the Metadb analytics platform from Index Data. So you might wonder, like, why are we having this discussion? And the goal here is to kind of help people that are new on the project get a brief history of how the reporting needs have been handled within the FOLIO project, and then how they evolved into what's also been called the LDP analytics space. So from a terminology perspective, I think the library data platform is sort of both the name of the broader project, as well as the name of the specific technology that was used to connect FOLIO data to an external data warehouse and has been updated to Metadb. So admittedly, I might not always quite use the right word in the right place, but they're not quite interchangeable, but they are closely related. We also want to affirm the reporting needs from institutions in the FOLIO community. So it's a chance for you to share your own reporting needs for your own institution. And we're here to affirm the desire from institutions that we've been hearing that people in the community want to have an open source reporting solution available. So we also want to provide a common understanding of the technical architecture and requirements for connecting FOLIO and Metadb, and know if there's ways that we could adjust the requirements to make it easier for institutions to use. And an opportunity to hear from you as our members and sort of the community about the successes and challenges and ideas to support reporting needs going forward. So this is, we're not going to be making decisions necessarily here, but we think this is a chance to get together. We can talk face to face. We also have folks that are online. And we can see that shows up there too. So we'll be able to check our chat and we'll be able to monitor that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Sharon, who's going to talk a little bit about the short history of reporting needs and desires in FOLIO.
Hello. I'm going to go way back to 2017, which is not that far back if you think about it, but it is in terms of all the things that have happened on FOLIO. So in 2017, the Reporting SIG was formed, and we had representatives from institutions around the world who were all getting ready and preparing to implement FOLIO. FOLIO software development was going forward, and various library applications were being developed, but there were no plans to build a reporting solution. The Reporting SIG membership took time to identify and document requirements for more than 250 reports across all of the membership of the FOLIO Reporting SIG. And we consolidated that as well. So that's what we were left with. These were reports for key functional areas like circulation, finance, and cataloging, the things that people need for operational activities, trend reporting, analysis, etc. So at the WOLFcon in May 2018, I got together with Todd Olson and Ann Highsmith. Todd Olson from the University of Chicago and Ann Highsmith from Texas A&M to put together a call for the development of a reporting solution for FOLIO that would provide data transformation and then transfer that data into a data warehouse. We didn't want to be hitting the transactional system with reporting. We needed it in a format that would enable institutions that would to build and deliver data analytics for their daily operations, finance, diagnostics, troubleshooting, all the different kinds of reports that are used. They also have batch jobs and automation that relies on this kind of activity. And so a robust data analytics solution that would allow reporting access across multiple domains, and what I'm talking about are different areas of functionality. So across circulation, so tying your circulation to your acquisitions, to your inventory, etc., while ensuring referential integrity in those data points. So that was needed, and we did a presentation calling for that following the May 2018 WOLFcon. CBSR Index Data gathered these requirements from the Reporting SIG and proposed the architecture for the library data platform, which would be an open source platform for library analytics. The Product Council approved this plan to start building an external reference data warehouse. And Technical Council also reviewed and approved the LDP architecture plan that EC proposed. In 2020, the LDP was deployed in production for FOLIO, which enabled institutions to deliver a FOLIO reporting solution along with their implementations of the FOLIO transaction system. This is a big deal. We got what we had hoped for. We got what we called for. So that was wonderful. The continuous development led to the first Metadb prototype also being released at that time in 2020. And then in 2021, Metadb was deployed in production for the ReShare project. And in 2023, this year, Metadb was deployed in production for FOLIO. So we're just gradually moving to Metadb.
We're doing a little tag team. So I wanted to put some information about the reporting SIG that's out there. This has been available as a SIG from our early days of SIG development, and I have the mission statement here. The reporting SIG will examine the reporting needs of institutions, offer advice on the design of FOLIO data models and reporting solutions, contribute time to the development of the sample queries, provide documentation and training on topics related to FOLIO reporting, and offer a space for subject matter experts and technical experts to engage in discussion and collaboration. So this reporting SIG has had support for the development of tools within the library data platform project, including but not limited to the LDP, Metadb, LD Lite, IDP Mark, FOLIO Analytics, and the LDP app. So if you're curious to find out more about reporting and how it's been developed over time, there's a lot more information on the wiki. It has been a SIG since 2017. There's a lot in the archives there, and it is recognized that reporting was recognized at that point in time as a key need for FOLIO adopters. And there are close to 50 members, I would say usually a dozen or so in attendance at the weekly meetings. So you might be wondering, like, what's the Product Council interest in all of this? You know, we do try to work with the SIGs to make sure that development's happening in FOLIO, and FOLIO institutions have indicated a continued need to have a reporting solution. And although LDP is itself a separate project, and historically FOLIO does not have a built-in reporting app, we endorse this separate data warehouse approach to provide openness, data sovereignty for library, and also a lot of flexibility and a lot of power in the model. So originally, LDP and then Metadb is offering this open source solution to reporting, and it's designed to work with FOLIO. Now, within the Product Council, we do sometimes hear from institutions they don't feel like they have a reasonable option to implement Metadb, even though it's something they're interested in. So part of this discussion is to broker an understanding of any of these issues so that Metadb can be an option for those institutions who would like to use it. Now I'm going to turn it over to Nassib, who's going to talk a little bit about the roadmap for Metadb and some technical issues or technical implementation.
So we thought it might be helpful to say something about the timeline of Metadb with respect to LDP. LDP was developed in a way based on what we could do at the time it's a sort of batch mode based data warehouse. And later on, we began working on Metadb, which is a more sort of modern approach where data can be streamed continuously from FOLIO or ReShare. So it supports both FOLIO and ReShare. And so it has some more interesting features. And so Metadb is really the sort of the successor of LDP. Now, some of these probably won't be very meaningful in this context, but they're relevant to when libraries can think about switching from migrating from LDP to Metadb if they're already running LDP. So sort of a key feature is the improved performance of synchronization. Synchronization is a part of the recovery if there's a hardware failure, something like that, along the streaming process that updates Metadb with data from FOLIO or ReShare. And so Metadb 1.2, there are already betas out right now, but if you're a large library and you want to make sure you have all the features you need for basically to go in production with it, but a good milestone would be January when 1.2 will be released. And then for European libraries, they're very interested in data anonymization. It's supported in LDP, but that hasn't been ported to Metadb yet. So for them, the July timeframe would make more sense. So something about the architecture here. FOLIO is backed by a database which maintains its current state at any moment in time. This is called a transaction processing database. Since it stores the current state of FOLIO or ReShare, in the case of ReShare, the data are here, and we want to get them all the way up to the Metadb database. And the users can connect directly. We use various database tools to connect directly to the Metadb database. And there's a sort of pipeline here where the architecture makes use of something in databases called change data capture, which is implemented in different ways by different databases, but the basic idea is that as changes occur in the database, those change events are captured and can be consumed by some other software. In this case, they're consumed by a system called Kafka Connect, which is a sort of connector framework for various sorts of Kafka data sources. And there's a project called Divisium, which creates Kafka connectors for change data capture for various different databases. So one of the supported databases is Postgres, which is what FOLIO and ReShare use. So it's able to propagate changes up to Kafka cluster. Now, Kafka is sort of like a database. They call it an event store, but it maintains a collection of queues. And so, like in this case, there's a queue per database table. And whenever a change is made to a database table, that change is pushed to the end of the queue, and readers can come from here and read from the other side of the queue. Now, so Kafka maintains the data for a while, and so there's no actual direct connection here. Kafka is sort of brokering between these two sides. And in effect, the data in Kafka are held in kind of escrow. So Metadb periodically pulls Kafka, gets the change events that occur down here, and then Metadb does various kinds of transformations. I went into detail about this in my talk this morning on Metadb. So see if you can maybe watch that video if you have time, and the slides are available as well. But the basic idea is that the data in FOLIO and ReShare are organized in a certain way that's optimized for basically writing to the database. That's what transaction processing databases do. And the data are organized basically to drive FOLIO and ReShare in a performant way. But up here in the Metadb database, the way that users interact with data is not through transaction processing. They connect directly to the database in some form. And they do generally reporting or analytic queries. And these kinds of queries tend to hit all of the data in some selected number of columns. So they can potentially scan a lot of data. Metadb also stores historical data, which I'll mention in a moment. So you could query not only the current data that are in FOLIO or ReShare, but all the data that have ever been there. And that can be a lot of data. And so the access patterns are different. The data are organized differently. And because the user is creating the queries or running the queries, unlike in a transaction processing database where you usually have a fixed number of queries and they're known at the beginning, you can optimize the database for that. For analytic queries, the user can create any kind of query. The user has the power basically to query across all the data. So it's very important that the user has a coherent query model. And that means a way of querying across all the different kinds of data that are in FOLIO or ReShare. So, for example, some of the data in FOLIO are stored in JSON because software developers often like to store data that way, and it makes sense for very sparse data. There's mark data in FOLIO, and you'd like to be able to write one SQL query that can use all these different kinds of data. And so the transformations that Metadb does basically convert all the different kinds of data into flat tables, which are simple. They're simple flat tables. And then SQL is designed to be able to combine data from different flat tables. That's the basic idea. Another difference, as I mentioned, is when data are deleted in FOLIO or ReShare, or a record is modified, if you go in through the FOLIO interface and you change a record, update it, or delete it, data are lost. They're deleted, they're overwritten. In Metadb, there's no overwrite of data. So if Metadb receives an event that says a record was modified or deleted, it takes the last version that it knows and marks it as no longer current. It records the start and end timestamps when that data was current, and then it just stays there, and you can continue to use it in your queries. And then if it's a deletion, it doesn't do anything else. So there's no record for that ID that's current anymore. If it's a modification, then Metadb will add the new record, the new version of the record that was received. So you have a kind of automatically versioned history of every record. LDP did something like this, but it was a daily snapshot along with the batch updates that occurred every night. But Metadb, because we have these continuous change data, it can update this history continuously. So if you make several changes in a row to a record, all of those changes should be available in Metadb. So that's another kind of transformation or another kind of difference between these two databases and how they're organized. A third is that if you're running Metadb with ReShare is a consortial deployment of Metadb. And so FOLIO, the ReShare is built on much of the same technology as FOLIO, including the multi-tenancy of FOLIO. But in FOLIO, multiple tenants are completely firewalled. They don't talk to each other. You don't want your library to see another library's data. But in a consortial setting of ReShare, you'd like to be able to query across the consortium or some subset of that data, because that's not storing all of the library's data, only the resource sharing data. And so in ReShare, because it's consortial, ReShare still uses the FOLIO model of storing ReShare different tenants separately. And so Metadb, so let's say you have a patron request table. So in ReShare, each tenant will have its own patron request table. And Metadb combines these all into a single table and adds a column called origin. And the origin tells you which tenant the data are associated with. So you could write a SQL query that queries across all of the tenants. And then if you decided you want to just focus on a few of the tenants, you can easily add that to the SQL query and just say where origin is one of these tenants. So it just makes the querying for consortial data easier. There are other various differences in the data and with the main goal of turning this database, unlike this database, which is not for humans, it's really for FOLIO or ReShare. This database has to be for humans. It's specifically for reporting humans, and so it's organized in a way that librarians that are doing reporting can work together on things. So in the Metadb database, each user has his or her own workspace. And then you can also, you can upload, import your own external data, like the data don't have to come from FOLIO or ReShare. You can use that workspace to store the results of queries, the results of reports to come back and look at later. You can create tables there for whatever reason. And you can also share them with other Metadb users. So this architecture is a bit more complex than LDP because it allows these sort of continuous updates. And LDP originally, still LDP basically connects directly to the FOLIO database and extracts data. If your hosting provider doesn't like that or doesn't want to have anything to do with LDP or Metadb, it could be something like this potentially. As I said, Kafka sort of stores the data in escrow, so you could have your hosting company just manage this part. They already manage the database. Then you would have to add Kafka Connect to Kafka. And then your library could self-host Metadb in the Metadb database. It's not very difficult. There's very comprehensive documentation. But if you wanted to have like a professional hosting, these could be hosted by another organization. I think Indexdata will do that. I see Mike Gorell here. He could tell you more about that. So this is one way where you could do a split hosting, the data basically flow to Kafka, and you just wait there, and you just open port only for this Metadb to connect, and then everything should work pretty well after that. So I guess now I'll turn it back over to Kristen. She needs this slide.
All right, well, now we get to the discussion part. So if these ground rules look familiar to anybody from the University of Chicago, I took these from some of our own discussion ground rules that we've been trying to encourage people to think about. And I know, given that we've got virtual folks as well as people here in the room, we're going to like to take questions and comments from both the online and in-person attendees. I think that we could let people talk who are virtual. If that doesn't work out, we'll go with the chat. But I think we should be able to give people a chance. So if we, I'll try to watch for people raising their hands, look in the chat and check. And we do have a mic that we can run around in the room here to make sure that everybody's able to hear. So it'd be great if before you ask a question, or if you type your question, if you can introduce yourself. And I realized I was in an earlier session where we didn't do that, and so it was probably just a big mystery, especially for people online, to hear these disembodied voices. So and then I hope that we get an opportunity for a lot of individuals to contribute. So if some people, if you have a lot to say, that's great, but let's see what else people have to say. So I would like to open it up, and we could, it looks like we have a question in the back from a hand already, so.
I did
Oh,
first. Shall
okay.
we just do a little quiz for who's using what now? But in the room at least. We can't do it online.
We could do a little quiz, and then we could start doing
Check
questions.
people are awake.
Okay, so this will be a raise hands type of quiz, you think? And then we can report to folks that are online. How many people do we have online anyway? It looks like we've got 35 attendees. I wonder if I could even do a quiz for the folks online, like a poll. All right, here, I'll let you do the in-person.
Okay, so maybe the first question in the quiz is, who is not yet running FOLIO at their institution? So we've got a few people who are in the waiting game so far. I think that was about 4 in the room. Who's running FOLIO but without a reporting solution at the moment? So that's, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the room, I think. Who's running FOLIO with LDP at the moment? That's kind of half of the room, I think we've got there. Who's running FOLIO with Metadb at the moment? And we've got, we got a pretty good showing there. That's about 8 and 2 halves, I think. And maybe we'll have to set up you running a poll at the moment?
I couldn't get a poll, but I could just ask folks to raise hands. So if you're online, you get a chance to answer the same questions. Raise your hand, except for Sharon. If you currently do not yet have FOLIO up and running, and you're all right, we have 1 person. Okay, lower your hand. All right, now raise your hand if you're running FOLIO, but you do not have any reporting solution. Okay, so we have 5, yep, all right, and then it was
LDP.
raise your hand if you are running LDP. We have 2. Okay, and now raise your hand if you're using Metadb. And I guess lastly, is there anybody who is doing a different reporting solution with FOLIO right now? And if you are online, feel free to type it in. And if you're here, raise your hand and I will come around and ask you.
I know.
Okay. So I think the first hand I saw was to a person in the back who I happen to know, but I'll let him introduce himself.
Dale from the University of Chicago. I was just wondering what kind of philosophy sort of guides your strategy for indexing the its purposes are so very different from sort of the FOLIO origin. If you speak to that, appreciate.
For creating indexes on tables? Yes. Yes, so so that's a very good question. I think it's a little bit of a technical question, but basically the trend, if you remember on the just slide at the very bottom, there's the FOLIO database or ReShare database, that's used for transaction processing. In that kind of system, you have sort of a fixed number of queries that you use over and again. And I may have mentioned that. And so you select which columns of tables to index based on them, to optimize the queries that really to be helped along. Because in a transaction processing system, you need your transactions to complete in a second or two faster, hopefully. So now the Metadb database is an analytic database, and users can write their own queries if there's users that are using it by writing SQL. That's not the only way to work with it. But if you're writing SQL, you can write any kind of query. You're working directly with the database, and so it's difficult to predict exactly which indexes would be most useful. In general, in my opinion, the most useful indexes in that context have to do with joins between tables. So when you join two tables, you select columns in each table and you say, I only want records where these two values are equal. And so that's called an equijoin sometimes. And so in Postgres, the fastest way to do that for large data is if Postgres does what's called a merge join, where it takes the indexes on those equijoin columns and runs through them in order, because it can just go like this the whole way down, and it's really fast. So, the most important thing is to index columns that are used in joins in that way. And most of the time, that's IDs, like the legal IDs in FOLIO. And so Metadb guesses that those are going to be the most useful indexes. And then later we'll add a feature where you can say, I want an index on this particular column because I'm going to use it a lot of joins. The queries are too slow, something like that.
All right, I saw another hand up somewhere.
Terence from National Library. I've got two questions. And the first question is, if we go, I don't know if we can go back to that slide, but the slide where you had the architecture with the shared hosting thing. It's the split hosting, that's what you call it. I guess if I ran that model, okay, maybe I'll explain my scenario. My scenario is rerunning LDP on our own data center, but we get a weekly extract of the Postgres database, and then we run it off that one. So we don't connect to FOLIO at the point in time. This is obviously a different solution for that. The Kafka connects and the event store, that's already within FOLIO, right? So that's not something else. You have to have that installed. You have to have that installed by your hosting solution. Is that what you're saying?
Is that the first question?
Yeah, that's the first question. I'll be quiet because I'm using the microphone. And then the second question, which I think I know the answer to this one, but I just want to clarify. You said that Metadb keeps a history of all the data, like as it changes over time, which is fantastic. Does that mean it only starts when you hook it up, right? So it won't have my 2 years of data that before I didn't install Metadb, right?
So I appreciate the questions. I'll just very quickly say that so there's a kind of the data flow goes this way, and so data are streamed this way. And if there's a break in the stream, depending where it is, then so in certain places it can just recover, because, for example, if there are breaks up here, Kafka's still storing the data, so you can still get it. If there's a hardware failure here or software failure here, you may have to do something called synchronization, which is Metadb's recovery thing, which basically takes a snapshot of the database And so for some period of time, you might lose some changes to begin the synchronization. The very first time you run MetaDB, it does that snapshot synchronization. Before that, it doesn't have any knowledge of the history because it wasn't captured. And in this diagram, so there are different ways to do this. It doesn't have to necessarily divide here. I think for reporting, a weekly snapshot is probably too slow. I mean, you can use it for some things. We'd like to have a nightly snapshot. I think for we're talking about LDP. This is continuous, so it just doesn't. No, maybe I've forgotten the final.
So the Kafka Connect, that from that upwards, those two boxes, I need that installed by my hosting vendor. Like that doesn't exist right now, like in my FOLIO environment. So I need that even if I go into hosting A and I stop hosting.
Kafka is already used by FOLIO. So in principle, you can use it for this as well. And then you just add Kafka Connect, which is a small addition. This is probably already provided here, the Kafka Connect, and you would just install the connector, the Postgres, change the capture connector for VPC. But the thing is, you need to know Kafka administration very well if you're going to use a shared instance for Kafka between these two systems, because you don't want them to interfere with each other in any way. But so once you have enough experience with, and I'm sure your hosting provider has enough experience to do that if they like, but they may prefer to create a separate Kafka instance for Metadb.
Right, thanks. We have another question here.
Hi, I'm Christy Thomas from the University of Chicago. First, I want to say thank you to Missy and the entire Reporting SIG for working on this because they are fantastic. But my question really has to do with the future of integration of the FOLIO UI itself. We are heavy users of LDP and we're looking forward to being heavy users of Metadb, but it does restrict who can make use of the reports, not just building the reports, but actually using the reports that are already built. I know there's been some efforts to create query builders within the FOLIO UI, but I'm wondering if there has been any discussion about being able to build the queries, just the SQL, and then serving that up through a widget maybe in the FOLIO UI so that end users who don't know SQL can trigger those reports or even pass parameters to them so that we can open up reporting to more users in our institution.
All right, so we don't think that runs away.
So I covered exactly that in the morning talk. So hopefully there's like no. I forgot. I didn't think to include a slide on that, but I think it's so. I think in a way one of the main features of Metadb is that you can interact with it at different levels. So in the talk this morning, I showed 3 levels just as examples. So the top level would be maybe for people who are running FOLIO and they just want to run a report or maybe look at some, do a simple query, filtering query on some data in FOLIO. They don't want to use any SQL, no SQL. And so we have this app called the LDP app or LDP reporting app. And it's been a little bit difficult to maintain the funding for that, but it's now picking up steam again. And that does allow, it allows some sort of basic browsing, but the developers have been working on a new feature, which is the ability to take a report that's created by someone in the institution or by let's say the reporting community, the reporting SIG, and it will show you all the parameters, and you can fill in parameters you're interested in, press a button, and you get back the table of data. And that they're almost done with that, I think, so it may come out in the next version of FOLIO. I would let you, but then I'm going to lose my train of thought. So let's say the middle area, the example I gave might be if you had a Cloud Beaver set up, which is it's sort of a web-based database client tool, so you don't have to install anything on the computer, you just use your web browser. It does, unlike the reporting app, it doesn't run inside FOLIO. So it's something you're hosting, you would have to set up for you. If you are willing just to do very light SQL writing, you can use the one that already is available now. You just say select star, the name of the report, and then you fill in the parameters you want, like parameter name equals value, parameter name equals value. You leave the parameters you're not interested in. Generally, they have the false values, so you leave those. And that's it. That's the only SQL command you need, and you get back a table, just like in dbeaver. dbeaver is a desktop client that's very popular in this community. That would be for more like intermediate SQL users. And at that would be the bottom level, let's say. At the bottom level, you know enough SQL that you could take a query that you developed, parameterize it, and I covered how to do that in the talk this morning. So you kind of convert your hard-coded values into variable names, and you list those parameters at the top. So you basically package your query as a report. And once you've done that, those other two levels can run reports without having to know any SQL. So the idea is that if you have somebody in your institution who can write SQL, or if you can use some of the reports created by the reporting SIG community, then you can, exactly as you said, although I don't remember exactly the words used, but make them available for everyone else in the library to run from within FOLIO without having to log into this separate tool. Is that considered?
Absolutely.
I think, didn't Sharon have some
Sharon?
silence?
Oh, no, I'll ask you later. It's too long.
I'm wondering, how is this envisioned to be set up along with the new enhanced consortial support system? We've got a multi-tenant structure and then a single central office tenant. Would you have a separate one of these columns for each tenant and then another one for the central tenant, or somehow combine that information together? Oh, I'm Lloyd Chittenden with Environment Library Network.
Most outstanding.
Okay, so I don't know all of the details of how they're planning to do that. It depends on whether you want those data to be combined so that one could query across them. I don't. I'm guessing that maybe for some consortia that would be fine, and for others it might not be. And so if they need to be kept separate, then each one of those libraries in the consortium will have their own. I mean, some of these resources can be shared, like Kafka is a scalable cluster, so we use the same Kafka cluster for all of them. But basically you need this kind of thing for each of the libraries. You want to keep them separate. They would each have their own Metadb database. Okay. But if it's a consortium where you don't mind the libraries querying across all of the other members' data, then you could turn on the feature that we use for ReShare, which combines the data from different tenants and puts them together into single tables. And it adds a column called origin, which tells you which tenant.
So, follow-up, would it basically be possible to have both of those so that, some people would have access to this, to the limited data for one library, and then some people would have access to all the data through the whole system?
Absolutely, I think that's possible. We haven't tested that, but basically what that means is that let me assume that all of the consortial tenants are stored in the same FOLIO instance and probably in the same FOLIO database, not necessarily. And FOLIO can also shard by microservices. So this could actually be more than one database. But let's assume they're all in one database to keep it simple. Then you would have two of these connector feeds, two change data capture feeds coming out. One of them would be configured to allow only the data you want to share with the consortium. And the other one would have all of the data, or all of the data that you need. And they would go into two different Metadb databases. One of the Metadb databases would be just for your library, you would have all of your data. And then the other one would be a shared consortial Metadb instance. So you can have both at the same time, in principle.
Sarah Fahrenbach, University of Chicago. I have what I'm afraid is a really dumb question. So if I'm in the wrong place and you want me to shut up, tell me. But I understand that MetaDB sounds much more powerful than the lists app that's being developed. But where is the overlap there? Does the lists app and MetaDB have any of the same functionality? So I'm not the list app PO, but we did get a chance to hear the list app in the product council, and my understanding, and if anybody here has a little more knowledge to talk more, is the idea for the list app came from institutions who are currently using III software. Those of you who have used III software probably remember Great Lists. And the EBSCO like hosting services teams were going around, and they were hearing from potential customers like, where's this? So they said, let's see what we could do to provide that type of functionality. So the way that I've understood it from when we got to see a prototype of it is it would be like a really sort of quick and dirty, we want to like check on some data that's going to be cross app and be able to do something that wouldn't be as fully featured as a full SQL queries, or that wouldn't have this type of versioning history. But it could allow for I'm trying to find some I guess the type of thing like right now that I do that's a bit in app, but then I run into restrictions if I'm personally trying to look at order data. I can get a big export out into Excel and try to filter it, and maybe I'd be able to use the list app to do some of that and pull in a couple things from inventory to help look for open orders that really shouldn't be open or the wrong status. I think for more robust type of querying or data analytics, or knowing what we also do at the University of Chicago with kind of a lot of testing and seeing how changes get propagated. I think that would be more in the provenance of the external data warehouse tool. I don't know if anybody else here would want to comment on that.
Well, you can just say I don't think it supports MARC. So if you have reports that require that, then you need something more robust.
Yeah, and what we saw in the product council, it was only hooking up to a couple apps so far, but I know that the plans are to get it to bring in more and more data. Are there other questions here?
Maybe I can just ask a follow-up, assuming WOLFcon University. to the National Library of Australia question about bringing history across. Presumably, if one is running LDP with daily or weekly updates, you've got a certain amount of history from that, although perhaps not the granularity one will get from Metadb. Presumably, when you migrate that, you would retain that history. I guess it's just a yes answer, so I don't need to pass the microphone. Yes, thank you, Steve. Just checking.
So I think we're starting to reach the end of the time. I'm just checking, are there any questions for folks online? I don't see anything in chat, and I haven't seen any hands. So I would encourage people, if you're interested in reporting and you would like to know more, Sharon and now Scott Perry, who's standing up over there, is going to be the incoming co-chair for the Reporting SIG, and they welcome new members and questions and support. If there are reports that you're thinking you need and you're not sure how to get them, that's a great resource as well.
I'll do some shameless promotion for our other other sessions at 2:45 in this room. We're going to go through experiences of implementing FOLIO reporting from the perspective of several different institutions. So you get a nice medley of experiences, and we'll also have time for questions. We also will have a session on LD Light for those who are interested, and then this is tomorrow morning, and then tomorrow afternoon, getting started with FOLIO reporting, and that will also talk extensively about reporting SIG, what we do, and how to get involved.
And one more thing, LD Light, for those of you that might not be familiar with that, that's using the FOLIO API to run queries. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. Basically what it does is so the time it takes data to get from here to here is usually a few seconds, but if there's a very large load on the database, that could take a few minutes. It's basically depends on what's going on here. So if you have some kind of a query that needs to have, let's say, to run at a certain time, it needs to have absolute real-time data. LD Light is a tool that uses Python to script, but it basically goes to the APIs and retrieves data, and it can put it in the Metadb database alongside your other data. It's used now by some libraries who don't have LDP, or maybe through their hosting provider, to provide a sort of a basic features. It tries to do as much of the same transformations that Metadb does, but just on a smaller scale.
All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. Oh, wait, Sharon has one more.
Sorry. Oxford has, what do you want to talk about? Okay, session right in this room again, which is apparently the reporting room.
I just want to promote another reporting session about the Metadb hosting, how to host, what best practice you have to have for hosting Metadb, and we have he's not here, Jason Root, who's actually hosting LDP and how to migrate from LDP to Metadb. We will have a tech talk on this. I think it's 11 p.m. in this room. No, for
All right, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, time, it's 11 p.m.